Awesome. Hi, folks. For those who are joining a little bit early, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. So if you want to go and use the bathroom, grab a coffee, it's the end of the day, feel free to do that. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Hi, I think we just got a batch of new folks. We'll begin in about a minute or two, so feel free to use the restroom, grab a drink, a little snack, and we'll get started very shortly. Awesome. I think we have a full group of people now, so hopefully you got that snack and can join us for the next 50 minutes to hour. Thank you all for carving out time today to join us on a Wednesday afternoon. We're just a few leaps away from the weekend. For those who might have forgot, tomorrow is Leap Day. But it's really great to see you all here for today's session on bringing communities together to build pathways to degrees and careers. For the next 50 minutes or so, we'll give you a quick overview of what Accelerate Ed is, for those who may not have heard of it, and we'll spend the majority of our time hearing from a set of wonderful leaders who are involved in leading efforts within their communities to build and scale accelerated pathways. Of course, at the end of our session, we'll have some dedicated time for a panel discussion that will be led by my wonderful colleague, Erin Workman, and we'll open it up for you all for some questions that you may have for the group if there's time. You'll see in your functions below on Zoom the Q&A function, so feel free to list your questions as you have them, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. And before I forget, my name is Janice Leh, and I work for Education Strategy Group. We're a mission-based consulting firm, and we work with communities to help build alignment between K-12, higher ed, and the workforce, primarily focused on helping students attain credentials of value and find economic mobility. And as part of the work, we help run the Accelerate Ed Network, which is a good segue for me to explain what that is. So what is Accelerate Ed? Accelerate Ed is an initiative that is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which started as an investment to 12 communities to help them think about how to scale accelerated pathways towards an associate's degree by their 13th year. During this time in 2022, we worked with a number of communities from Appalachia, Kentucky to New York City. A few of these communities you'll actually hear from today. And we primarily worked with them to help them both build and improve programmatic approaches that are in alignment with the Accelerate Ed model, which I'll talk more about shortly. And since we've expanded our community to include an additional 8 sites who are receiving deeper supports and participating in a blueprint development process similar to those in the initial 12. And beyond this, we provide additional learning opportunities to those interested in learning more about accelerated pathways more broadly. All in all, we have about over 30 communities within our network who are learning, building, and are scaling accelerated pathways. And the core elements of the Accelerate Ed model includes a few key things. For programmatic features, programs must offer a fast track to an associate's degree that is in alignment to high demand careers within the region. It also must be accessible to students, both in terms of it being of minimal to no cost to students and families, and it also must address barriers that limit access to underrepresented students. Additionally, it must be designed around an intentional integrated curricular experience and student support, such as providing integrated work-based learning experiences, providing a sequenced set of college courses where students can earn at a minimum of 12 credits that are transferable, and there are embedded college and career advising for students. And coming out of the design sprint with the 12 communities, There were a few important things we learned along the way about what it takes to have successful accelerated pathways to credential models. We found communities were most successful when there were, one, strong cross-sector partnerships where K-12, higher ed, workforce, and youth-serving organizations are all coming to the table. We also found that intermediary leadership played a critical role as they had the capacity to convene across partners and provide valuable expertise and insight. It was also important for programs to be equitably designed to ensure that we are not reproducing programs of privilege. And lastly, policy, funding, and data are critical enabling conditions to help communities further scale their work. And since then, as I mentioned earlier, we've continued to not only work with new communities, but we've had the opportunity to follow alongside existing communities, continue to learn about their work and share it with a broader community, kind of like what we're doing today. Which leads me to the best part of this session, which is hearing from those who are on the ground and really digging deeply into this work. Today, we've brought together a set of individuals who are quite awesome and amazing from the original design sprint 2 years ago, who are working to build and scale accelerated pathways within their communities. So first off, I want to give a warm welcome to Stephanie Devine, who's the Executive Director of Teach for America Appalachia, to talk about the great work happening in Kentucky. Stephanie with us still? Okay, we may need to return back to her because I think we had a few internet issues. So we can move to Tom and team to do some introductions and talk about what's happening in Ohio.
Thank you so much. We're really privileged to be a part of this Accelerated Ed and creating pathways to what we think are our most in-demand careers. Very, very significant. Joining me, I think, I know Liz, I saw Lynn Cicchetti from Sinclair Community College. I think Christy Fairfax is also joining. So if you go to the next slide, this gives you an overview of the work that we're doing. You can see that we're the Learn to Earn Dayton is the intermediary and the project manager, providing the project management. Christy Fairfax has been our director for all this work and the consultant who's really leading the effort. I'm going to give a quick overview, which with sort of the key elements, and then I'd like to have Christy offer a couple of observations as well. We really have relied very heavily on youth science, and youth science is critical in terms of helping students understand their interests and their abilities, their aptitudes, and then using that information to make sure that we put the students in the right pathway to a career that's going to be hopefully resulting in a living wage job for that student and also a fulfilling career. So we think to do what we have to accomplish, you need good information about the student's interest and aptitude. You need a navigator who can help those students successfully navigate the pathway. And then you need to have the assets in place for really accomplishing your outcomes. And those assets include things like the college courses and the work-based learning experiences and all the other things that are a part of what we think a successful pathway should consist of. Christy, if you're on, why don't you share just a couple of other observations about the whole effort of implementing the youth science assessments. Christy?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. So this gives you a little bit of background about youth science for those that aren't familiar with it. It's a really interesting tool. It's different than your average interest or skill-based survey, where it combines the two. It uses brain games. So it's not really clear, what they're trying to dig for. So it's a little bit funner for a student to take as well. And the data that we use this as kind of a way to start a conversation with a student. We start exploration and exposure prior to when students are taking the assessment. The assessment is being given in 8th grade to our students. And it helps identify students' interests and aptitudes, which gives us a few things. So first of all, interest, we need to know where their interests lie because it's really important to connect their learning to their areas of interest. but also that may expose gaps as well, because a lot of times students are interested in what they know. And we know that exposure is really key for expanding that interest. So if we see them having an aptitude in another area, but a low interest, it may be that the student has not been exposed to that area, just because that's not maybe a part of their everyday world. For example, when we look at some data, we see really high, which we love to see that. But we also know that that's something that students are exposed to every single day. So that's something we come to expect now when we see these results. So it gives us some really interesting things. It helps us identify for ourselves a measure of success for exposing students to more careers. Are we seeing, more diverse interests in that exposure? And then we can also understand too where our students, interests are, or maybe students have high level of interest in one thing, but we're seeing low aptitudes. Then we know we need to focus on providing some opportunities for increasing aptitudes in those interest areas to get those to align.
Thanks.
Next slide, please.
Thank you, Christy. And this work is occurring. You can see this is the U-Science data. Gives you examples of what this looks like. All the school districts in our area are using U-Science. It's fundamental to the work that we're doing to make sure we try to match students with the pathways that are going to help them be successful. Again, the U-Science, the navigator role, having the work-based learning experiences and sort of job shadowing opportunities the students need are absolutely critical to what we're doing. But this can show you data. What the slide right there shows you data from our area in terms of the students who have an interest or an aptitude, and then it shows the combination of the two. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to ask Liz, as we look at the College Credit Plus courses and so forth, I want Liz to say something about that, especially with regard to this chart. Christy, you want to set this up, and then we'll move over to Liz.
Sure. So this chart just kind of shows our general plan for how students are moved through our pathways. We focus on in K through 5 and 6th through 8th grade career connected experiences. This is expanding that exposure. In 8th grade, they take the U-Science, and then we help them make decisions on their pathway. In our district that we're piloting this in, they have career technical pathways, they have APIB pathways, and then they have CCP pathways. Students make a decision in 10th grade. They apply to the different pathways when they're in 10th grade and make that decision on what their 11th and 12th grade years will look like. So you can kind of see on this slide, it illustrates where our pathway navigator, that we're our workforce development navigators, the title that we're using, is working with those students. Not only is she coordinating those career connected experiences, but then she's starting to work with students more closely in 9th and 10th grade to talk to them about their choices. And then has one-on-one interactions with right now we're just in our first year of implementation with a small group of students. Right now there's 10 students just in that in the house in the middle yellow pathway with the star next to it, the healthcare pathway, starting on those CCP pathway courses. And they work alongside a transition counselor from Sinclair College. So Liz, I'll hand it off to you for the next slide to talk about those pathways.
So this is an example pathway that we worked with the ESC to help create. And if you, what you're seeing is that it's showing the identified pathway. So for this one, it's IT, how a student that knows that they're interested from 8th grade all the way through 12th, what courses they can take. The courses with the plus are CCP, which is our dual enrollment. So we laid out ideally what it would look like for students to take courses in high school, both their high school coursework and their dual enrollment to get exposed. The pathways, the great thing about the pathways is that we don't just release these. We've had events based around them. So we've had development and implementation labs where we've brought together high schools to talk about what this would look like. At those events, we'll have people from Sinclair speak in terms of like the department and what they're looking for and strategies in terms of helping students get through those pipelines and start their courses well in high school along with industry. And then we have work time that goes along with it. So we'll work with the high schools to have those conversations. A lot of the conversation is about identifying the students, and then once the students are identified, how do we make sure we're able to offer those courses? So partnering in terms of credentialing high school teachers or ensuring that we can support them with a Sinclair faculty member.
And we have these, I've really, with this slide, it shows you for information technology, computer science, but we have these put together for advanced manufacturing, for health, for other areas as well. And I think if those on this call would like to see these pathways, we'd be more than happy to share those with any interested party. Liz, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, sorry. And we also have education, aerospace and aviation. So I should have elaborated a little bit more that this was just one example.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Janice?
Thank you.
I think that gives
thank
the overview for us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you, you three, Liz, Christy, Tom, for sharing all the great work that's happening in Ohio. Thank you to the audience for hanging in there as we experienced a few internet issues, but we're going to hand it back to actually Kentucky with Stephanie.
Yes, thank you all for your patience and grace. I am traveling and in a hotel where, as many of you know, Wi-Fi is not as always reliable as we think that it be, but we were creative. We solved the problem. So grateful to be with you all. I'm Stephanie Devine, the Executive Director of Teach for America Appalachia. Teach for America is a national organization. We've been working in Eastern Kentucky for the last 12 years. I'm excited to share about our work in Accelerate Ed. So as you might be thinking off the bat, Teach for America does not typically play in these spaces. We've been in Eastern Kentucky for the last 12 years, building school partnerships between K-12 districts across a large portion of the state. And when we heard about this opportunity, what we connected to is our 2030 goal that we have locally to double the number of students who achieve post-secondary readiness and success. So we as the intermediary site team lead had a lot of K-12 connections. We worked with IHE, we worked with workforce partners. So we brought together 2 of our school sites as pilot sites, had a higher ed partner to community college, and then brought together a lot of workforce specific organizations that really helped us think about student learning experiences, work-based learning experiences, and how to have credentials that lead directly to workforce readiness in our most underserved communities. You'll also see that there are 2 local community foundations that played a clear role, one in helping to think about sustained and braided funding, and the other one to help us think about how do you target populations of students that are historically the most underserved. So that's the team. And then the vision of the pipeline for us was really clear that it had to, and you've heard this before, it's not just about the stackable credentials and the accelerated 13th year degree. It's about how do you create wraparound supports and experiences for students that lead to actual generational change as far as economic ability, wellness, and a community rooted approach that makes sure that students can stay where they want to stay in the places that they love without having to sacrifice a meaningful career. So as you'll see, a lot of our focus area in the Eastern Kentucky Student Success Pipeline was near miss students. So those kids that we all know who are on the cusp of being ready for the ACT, a lot of students who might have, identity markers that make it challenging for them to get through into post-secondary, students who are first gen, but students who are right on that cusp. And we were looking at those students to think about how might we close both technical gaps and more adaptive wraparound gaps to get those students again to and through post-secondary into a high demand local career field. If you don't know a lot about Eastern Kentucky, we work in the 2nd poorest congressional district in the nation. Our students are incredible. Our communities are resilient. And yet, as in many places that you all work are probably true, the systems and structures around them do not support our students yet holistically to get to and through post-secondary. And so what we've done is leverage a student-centered design process. And you'll see here literal quotes from our students as we went through the process of engaging with kids, some of whom we've known for a long time, some of whom were new to us. We made sure to talk to students from all academic profiles, all the way from valedictorians to students who were really facing a risk of dropout. And what you'll see in this slide is a real mix of big picture challenges, like, I don't know if I can get a job in the town that I love. I don't know anybody who's been to college, to things that to me were the most heartbreaking, which is a quote that I lose sleep about most nights out of the year, of a young lady who was the valedictorian who said, I didn't know you could get a scholarship if you were not an athlete. And so what this revealed to us is it wasn't just this cultural challenge around post-secondary, right? It's not just an adaptive issue of getting people excited to or ready for college. There were real technical gaps we could close that would make a big change for kids in a lot of our target populations. And so when it came to designing the management team, I think what we landed on is a pretty innovative approach that, again, focuses not just on a set of interventions, but really intensive coordination between all the folks who serve kids. So you'll see at the center, as it always should be, students and caregivers. But throughout this incredibly complex, beautiful maze of arrows and boxes, what you'll notice is that everybody is always coming together to go back to How do we coordinate between folks on the ground at schools, workforce, employers, higher ed, and our sort of near peer supports to go back to what does the student need? What are the wraparound supports required? And let's just get really concrete for a second. What this means is that in one student's profile, there might be an internship with Rural Up. There might be a student who's getting future forward coaching, which is near peer mentoring towards post-secondary success. And the student goes to a high school where they get a lot of their academic content and supports. So when you look up here at the top, where you see school-based AKISP coordinator, what that person is doing is always making sure, okay, how do we make sure that the student's internship coordinator and their teachers and their future forward coach are all collecting data and collaborating to see where the student is in terms of their post-secondary goals. You'll see in a second where we are in implementation is figuring out all of these individual pieces. We're still landing the school coordinator role, but we think that's a really critical move. Essentially, where we landed on from the start of our design team journey to today is a four-prong approach that mirrors the Kentucky Student Success Collaboratives model in terms of so that we can have alignment and language across the two institutions. But essentially, first we have to chart the path, right? As you saw in those student quotes, how do we help kids dream about the possibility of something different and get very, very clear about their individual plan for post-secondary work? We have to really get technical in the clarifying the path of how do students access meaningful dual credit that translates concretely to other post-secondary institutions in the state. We have to make sure, and you all know this better than anybody, how do we make sure kids stay on that critical path through near peer mentoring, through advising, through direct to student support once they get into post-secondary? And then how do we make sure that students are continuing on that path, moving out of high school with all the skills that they need to actually matriculate successfully and be retained? So that's where we landed as far as our four-prong design. Where we are now is updating our Future Forward near peer model. I'd love to talk more about Future Forward to anybody who's interested, but Future Forward really focuses on having current first-gen college students mentor existing high school students around post-secondary readiness, long-term economic mobility planning, and navigating dual credit in particular. We're doing a lot of technical work, again, you saw in multiple slides, thinking about dual credit alignment as far as pathways, articulated credit agreements, making sure that the standards align between post-secondary and high school math, and then thinking a lot about workforce partnerships to think about what I'm sure a lot of us are grappling with, which is how do students have meaningful workforce experiences that don't deprive them of making money or missing school, but sort of are inclusive of all three of those things? How can I stay in school, make good money at my workforce engagement, and make really meaningful learning progress in this field? So we're so glad to be part of this group. It's been an incredible learning experience, and we are just starting the journey, it seems like, today in many ways.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Super appreciate all the things that you shared, especially around the student-centered design and your experience within Accelerate Ed. The last person I want to welcome to the quote-unquote stage is Jennifer Meller, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the Greater Phoenix Chamber, to talk more about her work in Arizona and her work through Elevate Ed AZ.
Well, thank you so much, Janice, and it's a pleasure to be presenting to you all today. I would just echo my colleagues' comments just around this experience, and being part of the Accelerate Ed network has led to a lot of learning on our behalf, and it's just been a great opportunity for sharing of best practices across different communities across the country. So it's a pleasure to be a part of this group. So we formed a team here in the Greater Phoenix region that consisted of Elevate Ed AZ, our Maricopa Community Colleges, and then 2 of our high school districts. So I am the Chief Innovation Officer with the Greater Phoenix Chamber, and our foundation serves as an intermediary. We do a lot of workforce development work, and then our signature program is called Elevate Ed AZ. And we are embedded in 20 high schools across Maricopa County, including our friends at Mesa Public Schools, which is the largest school district, unified school district in the state of Arizona, as well as Phoenix Union, which is the largest high school district in Arizona. So 2 very, very large school districts serving a predominantly low-income student population. And we pulled together as a network really to try to address and tackle the manufacturing workforce here in Arizona. And a few of our employer partners also came to the table. This isn't a comprehensive list, but we had folks like Boeing and Honeywell who do a lot of aerospace manufacturing in our market, as well as Intel, who's a semiconductor manufacturer, and Able Aerospace, who's also in the aerospace industry. Let's go to the next slide, please. When we pulled our group together, our initial thought was, well, we want to be able to build pathways that are going to get to an associate's degree within year 13. And we wanted to align that with the labor market, but have a specific focus on advanced manufacturing. And where we actually landed as part of our vision statement was just a more refined version of that initial goal and that initial mission. And next slide. So the reason that we focused on manufacturing specifically, similar to my colleagues, we focused on manufacturing with the intent that we would be able to replicate this across other industry sectors as well. But Arizona has a massive manufacturing industry, and it's growing significantly. So we, just a few years ago, had the largest announcement of new jobs in a market. The Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation announced that they were going to build the largest semiconductor plant in the world here in Arizona. And with that comes not only jobs directly from TSMC, but from all of their suppliers and all of their network. At the same time, Intel, who already has a presence here in Arizona, they said that they wanted to also expand their operations. So Arizona is projected to be #1 in manufacturing growth, and we have 30-some thousand jobs projected over the next 5 years. So a significant workforce demand. But then when we looked at the supply, we had a really good strategy at the post-secondary level. Arizona State University is one of the largest producers of engineering students in the country. We have our community colleges have created specialized boot camps and fast-track associate degrees specific to the manufacturing sector. But when we looked at our K-12 system and our high school system specifically, we had one CTE pathway in manufacturing across the greater Phoenix region. One class with 24 students. That is never going to meet the demand of the 30,000 jobs that are coming online. And these are great, high quality, high paying jobs. So hence our focus on manufacturing. And what we did is we pulled together a group of folks, and we had to really get into the nitty gritty. And similar to our friends in Montgomery County, we created a course pathway that outlined exactly how students were going to achieve that associate's degree by year 13. And then we also took that information and laid in, here's what your sample career pathway could look like. Here are your post-secondary options. Here are your employment opportunities. And then similar to my colleagues, we used U-Science in all of our partner schools. And we went out and we actually targeted non-traditional students and brought in women in manufacturing and did a manufacturing night and really tried to encourage young women that had an aptitude, maybe not an interest, but had an aptitude for manufacturing. And we invited them to this presentation. They were able to see women that looked like themselves and just got a better picture of what a manufacturing career might look like. And so we were able to fill that manufacturing class. And then we also had a really specific focus around dual enrollment. And Arizona has dual enrollment in Arizona is students on a high school campus that are earning college credit. And in Arizona, students are charged tuition to do that. We do have some supports for low-income students, but they're kind of hit or miss and haphazard. And so we did a lot of focus, or we did some focus groups really to identify some specific challenges around dual enrollment attainment. And what we found as part of that survey is tuition assistance was absolutely necessary in order for us to be able to scale dual enrollment across the state. So during our design phase, we were really excited about Prop 308, which was a statewide ballot initiative that provides in-state tuition for undocumented students. Arizona is a predominantly Hispanic and Latino population. So this was a big win for our community and something that the chamber got behind alongside other business organizations and was really supportive of. So a big win for our community. Then as part of this work, we worked as a chamber with some other organizations, and we were able to go to the legislature last year and secure $15.5 million in funding specifically for dual enrollment. So 15 million covered tuition assistance for low-income students to take dual enrollment courses. And then another $500,000 was directly focused on incentivizing teachers to teach dual enrollment classes, because we have a huge shortage of not just teachers, but specifically teachers that are qualified to teach dual enrollment. So we've had some really great success to tackle some of our enabling conditions, which was a big win for our effort. So looking forward, all of that work also led to close to $1 million grant from Helios Education Foundation to really double down on dual enrollment. And this is focused on just generating more awareness across the state that the tuition assistance exists. It also is focused on getting more teachers dual enrollment certified. So we've been really heavily pushing the dual enrollment piece. We also have a task force that we formed as part of this work that's coordinating between our high schools, our high school districts, and the community colleges, really to try to break down some of these additional barriers around dual enrollment, and then share best practices so that other schools can also implement and strengthen their dual enrollment programs. And then one of the things that we actually launched earlier this week that I'm really excited about is an Arizona Dual Enrollment Coalition. And that's focused on promotion of the state funding, the tuition assistance, the teachers' incentives, really trying to get the message out across the state and using multiple partners to try and communicate out that message through their media and their avenues. And one of the reasons this was so critically important is similar to my colleagues, as part of our student-centered work and really trying to capture student voice, we also heard a lot of students that said, I don't see myself on a college track. Why would I take a dual enrollment course? And so we know we need to tackle that kind of perception of students and really try to get themselves to see themselves as potential college students. And then this work has also led us to already creating accelerated pathways in other industries. We were actually able to apply for a grant for a healthcare pathway. So Cigna provided us a grant that is focused on creating some new CTE pathways specific to the healthcare industry. And we are currently in the process of developing a Red Tech program at the CTE level. So very exciting work. And again, we see tremendous opportunity to continue to scale this work in the near future. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, excuse me, and the rest of the panel. I think that's a really good segue into some questions that we have for you all to share with the rest of the group. But I just want to bring everybody's attention to the Q&A. I know we've had some questions go back and forth, but if you've got anything, at top of mind, we'd love to be able to highlight that and raise that up for our panelists. So please feel free to drop some questions in and we'll make sure to monitor that while we're going through. But Jennifer, you spoke really and said some great things about this coalition and the importance of these partnerships. So I think I'm going to start with you. And what key features make cross-sector partnerships so successful in supporting the building out of these accelerated pathways?
Yes, well, funny that you asked the question because I thought about this in advance. And I think one of the most critical components is having the right stakeholders at the table. And so it was interesting as Janice was doing her welcome and talking about one of the key elements. I would absolutely say, having the right group organized with a good intermediary is critically important. Just one of the experiences we had is just designing that pathway and that program. We were all racking our heads, how do we make this work and how do we go through this? we brought one individual into a room and we had this meeting with her, and she was just sitting there writing on a napkin this whole time. And I thought, what is she doing? She's not even paying attention. And at the end of the meeting, she comes over and she hands me the napkin, and it was the whole design, the whole program design. So she's been a critical element in designing out those pathways for us. The other piece I would say is critically important is just to think outside of the box. I think, just our natural mindset is, well, we've done things this way all the time, or, we have we're limited with tuition assistance. Well, think outside of the box and think on behalf of students, and we can do so much better for all of our students.
Yeah, I love that. Get creative and don't let what we think could be potential barriers stand in the way to these awesome innovations and ideas. So I really appreciate that. Stephanie, I'd love to hear from you from your perspective on what makes partnerships successful.
I totally agree with Jennifer, first of all, that we have to really break down this idea of formality versus having the right people in the room. And so when you look at our sort of partnership list, I think I was struck at first with these folks would never normally get together. And so I think a lot of the power of it is, how do you just elevate perspectives, areas of expertise, geographies in some cases, or content areas that are maybe tangential to each other in a formal way, but never actually have a chance to get together. One concrete example that I love is, it took us sitting down with our community college partner and a community foundation to realize that they were both pursuing grants for the same thing when they could have done it together. But how would you have ever found that out, right? When it's like, we both want to see more healthcare employees, we both want to see smarter pathways, but unless you bring those folks together, those kind of connection points don't happen. The other thing I would say is that I find that partners ask questions that as an intermediary, you never think to ask, because of, again, areas of expertise, lived experience, things that they've seen in the ecosystem that you haven't seen. So I fully believe that without this sort of diverse set of partnerships, we would not have moved the work even a quarter as far as we did.
Yeah, I really love that, and your point on like power in elevating different expertise. That really just hit home for me, and I highlighted that on my notes page. Tom, we'd love to hear from you, also on the Ohio side, and your wealth of knowledge on successful partnerships.
I think the others have really highlighted the key ingredients. Let me just say that one of the things we did, Christy, Liz, others who were involved in this, we accessed the voices of the people that we were trying to impact. So I think it's imperative that anyone doing this work connect with the young people, try to find out where their interests are and what they see as some of the barriers. We spent a lot of time really connected with a lot of young people because we were really trying to go after what we call the missing middle. There are a whole host of students who work through CTE programs and dual enrollment programs who basically don't need any of us. They're going to figure it out all on their own, regardless of what systems are in place. We were trying to go after what we call lost intellectual capital. Where are there students who simply are not being provided with the opportunities that are going to allow them to be successful? And now, how do you create defined pathways? And I think it's really critical. Community colleges that have had success in fostering enhanced completion rates, they will tell you that one of the ingredients for accomplishing that is to have really clearly defined pathways with good advising and good navigational supports.
And if I can just jump on that really quickly, Erin, I think that student voice was something that was a learning for us. So I'm with an intermediary organization. I had not heard of an empathy interview prior to going through this work. And so I think it's something that the education world knows well, but oftentimes does get lost or gets put on the back burner. And so, student voice was front and center throughout this entire convening, and I think was a huge aha moment for me.
Well, I think just to get really precise, Jennifer, that's such a good point. I think when you're working in an underserved community, we make assumptions of, I've worked here for a long time. I have a broad sense that things are not okay or things aren't good enough for kids. We go to work every day because of that, but it's so hard to miss the precise insights that you get from an empathy interview in particular, to move from the kids are not okay, to put it, to keep it plainly, to like, oh, these are the specific barriers that kids can identify that we as intermediaries would not necessarily be thinking about in our design or implementation work.
Yeah, that I think is great, right? We sometimes sit in these seats, right? Even just from adults or where we are in the work, and sometimes forget our most important stakeholder voice and to include that. So I think that's also a good kind of segue into my next question. And Christy, I'd love to start with you, but what were some of the challenges you encountered when you were designing and implementing these programs, and how have you really worked to address them?
Sure. So we are just very newly implementing our program. We're in the first year right now. So some challenges have been, funding, get enough resources. And that there's, of course, never enough resources. So trying to figure out how to do more with less, that's definitely been a challenge, but we've really had the right people on board with that. And then I think a challenge too is communicating to the parents, to the students, to all of the faculty within the district to understand the intent of the program. And so that's something that we're really working on to make sure everybody in the district, everybody that the students are interacting with are on board and understand the intent of the Workforce Navigator and the experiences. And that was something that came out of our student empathy interviews, really. We talked to them about who was there to guide them through these decisions as they make college and career decisions and about their future. And we heard from them, well, for the most part, it's our parents. So we realized we need to really ramp up and leverage the parents. And when we talked to the parents, they said, we want more tools. So that's something that we're really trying to integrate as we roll this out. And then also keeping in mind all of those other individuals that students cited as helpers in making these decisions and leveraging, given we don't have enough, there's never going to be 100% of the resources that you would love to have. How do we tap into all of those resources that we do have to make a really effective program? So that's one of our challenges that we are working on addressing this year.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful too, of helping not just our students, but their families really make informed choices and feeling like that they can do that together. Sometimes they're, often supported separately. So I think that's really great. Jennifer, I'd love to hear from Arizona about some challenges and how you guys have worked to get through those and answer those.
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges we have, and it's a redundant challenge, is really around data and being able to share the right level of data. So when we think about dual enrollment, for example, there are significant challenges with a student's ability to actually register for a dual enrollment course at the community colleges. And they have data sharing agreements in place between the schools and the community colleges. There should be a way, and this is one of the things that one of the barriers we're trying to break down, but why don't we enroll every high school student in the community college and remove that even as a step and a potential barrier?
That will be great. And when we all come together in another year, that we'll hear the update from you that you guys were able to get every right
You heard it
student in
here.
Arizona. Stephanie, would love to hear from you too about some, a challenge faced and how you really worked to overcome that.
One thing we encountered with our high schools in particular is the sense that creating pathways is an overwhelming task that would require a lot more humans, that would require a lot more money. And I think what we did was we brought in One Goal, which is an amazing organization that's been funded to be in Kentucky for the last 2 years. So we brought One Goal into the district and brought in sort of a balcony view of somebody who had expertise to say, okay, what is literally true about your course pathways right now? What would have to be true in 6 months? And what I think a third party can often do is see possibility that when you were in the trenches, when you're a full-time school counselor, superintendent, so bringing in that third party really helped them to map out the course requirements in different ways and saw that it wasn't so much that they needed more money or more people. It was down to like, how do you align one more standard? How do you think about like one more course for your instructor? And so what we were able to do in the last 6 months, Harlan High School, which is an amazing school led by one of our design team members, went from having 0 student pathways to 12. And again, I think in their mind, that was going to take 7 years and $1 million, but it took bringing in that, third way or balcony view perspective to help them see the size of the challenge as opposed to what it actually was.
Yeah, I love that. It's just one step at a time, right? And we can be so embedded in our own work. I think that's really great and speaks to the wonderful work that we all know One Goal has and is doing in multiple states and communities. I'd love to ask one final question of the group, and Liz, I'd love to start with you, but would love if you could share a specific success story or an example of a student in your community who's really benefited from participating in these accelerated pathways.
Yeah, so as Christy stated, we're in the first year of implementing. So we have 10 students that we identified through either completing U Science or applying into the CTE healthcare program that did not get accepted. And so we worked with those students to approach them and explain what the program that we're doing entails, and then we're able to get them enrolled in a CCP course, which is our dual enrollment. They are, successful in this one course. I think in terms of pathway, we have a year or two to go to see where that lands. But looking at the work that we've done in terms of outlining pathways and then the partnership, our dual enrollment is currently in year 9, and our career tech at the community college has had a consortium for over 25 years, and we've seen success stories with our pathways. So I think what we're doing now is that, like Tom said, we're identifying those students that they're the missing middle. So we have the right people in place and the right kind of pathways and policies and practices. We just need to get the students in good communication and identify them and be working to align them to the right pathways.
Yeah, that's such a great approach too, right? Of kind of you're doing like a micro and a macro, I think kind of push support from that. But Jennifer would love to hear a success story from an Arizona student.
Sure.
For general.
So one of the things that we haven't really touched on is the importance of business engagement and work-based learning as far as part of this pathway design. And that's a huge area of focus for Elevate Ed and the work that we're doing. But we're actually working to place high school students into internships, and we've had some really, really great success and growth in that goal over the last couple of years. But the one student that just sticks with me is we had a young man that was in a manufacturing pathway at one of our partner schools, and he got an opportunity to take an internship with Honeywell. And the administration was struggling. Do we let him proceed with the internship or not? Because he was falling behind in his courses and he was not on track to graduate. And this was in like December. So he needed to complete his courses over the next 5 months. And ultimately the decision was made to let him proceed, let him participate. And not only did he graduate, but he also got a full-time job offer from Honeywell, and his parents reached out to us and they were so excited. They said he is receiving compensation and benefits like we've never seen before. And like that to me is full circle, right? Like you've got somebody who has opportunity, they see themselves and they have the ability to apply. We can totally turn them around. So warms my heart every time.
Yeah, that is a great, powerful story. Like not giving up on our students, right? And letting them have these opportunities that are not normally afforded to them. Stephanie, last but not least, would love to hear success from your side of things.
When prior to this job, I was a teacher coach, so I had the privilege of seeing a lot of students move through our schools. There was a young man who was a really challenging middle school student, the kind that as a teacher coach you remember vividly, in fun and not fun ways. But this young man, I saw him last in 8th grade really struggling, and one of our partner schools, the Floyd County School of Innovation, has done a tremendous amount of work around agriculture entrepreneurship pathways, which is really fascinating in our context. I had not seen this student in 4 years. I pull up for a tour with some of our funders, and I walk in and he is leading the school tour of the pathway. And I think to everyone else's story, this is a young man that was counted out and said he was never going to be academically successful. He had no ambition, but he fell in love, y'all, with growing lettuce. That boy loves growing lettuce. He has like a hydroponic system that he uses in the school. But it was just a story for me of when you provide clarity for students of there is a workforce pathway for you. Here are the classes you have to take to do that. And not only that, but what's a leadership role that you could play as a young person who has maybe never felt empowered to be a leader? So I think about that moment all the time, and it's such a good example of the power pathways have to change kids' lives.
I love that. And that can be like the new tagline, the power of pathways, right? And these superstar students that, right, when are challenged can rise to that in so many good ways. We just want to thank, I want to thank everybody here on our panel, not just for sharing about their work, but I think, going above and beyond, and spending time with us today. I just want to make sure, I don't see any other questions, but loved the participation from everybody in our virtual room, and just wanted to really close out. If you are all interested in Accelerate Ed in general, you can scan this QR code and definitely reach out. I will happily speak, right, for our panelists. I think they would love if you've got any specific questions for them as well. Happy to share their answers to that, and feel free to reach out to any of us. And we just really appreciate the time spent for everybody's time spent with us today. We'll hang on for about another minute if there's any questions. I might have seen just one pop in right now. Oh no, just a general thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate everybody coming out today, and good luck on the continuation of all the hard work across all of your communities. Thanks,
I
Mary.
don't think, yeah, thank you all for hanging on today. We appreciate your time. And as you see in the chat, if you haven't seen it yet, there's many kudos to you all. But Erin and I will keep in touch and let you know if there are any follow-ups or questions. And then for the remaining 25, thank you all. Have an amazing leap day tomorrow, and a happy end to your February. Hoping you all have a wonderful start to the month of March. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye, all. Thank you, Laura.
Oh yeah, no
Thank-
problem. It ran really smoothly. Was a great session. So congrats.
Yeah, thank you. We'll keep in touch, and please tell Emily thank you for all the organizing.
I will. I'll pass it along.
Okay. Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.